I'm Nicole, 28 years old, and Sunday afternoon I got a phone call that turned my entire world upside down. Sweetheart, did you get moved into the house yet? My grandfather's excited voice crackled through the phone. I nearly dropped my coffee mug in my tiny studio apartment. Grandpa, I have no idea what house you're talking about. The silence that followed felt like forever. Then he said words that made my heart stop. The 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Street. I bought it for you 3 months ago. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely invisible in your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and explain how I got to this moment. Growing up in the Morrison family meant learning early that love came with conditions, and apparently I never quite met them. My parents, Linda and Robert Morrison, had 3 children. My older brother Jake, who could do no wrong, my younger sister Emma, who was the princess, and me, the afterthought stuck in the middle. Jake was the golden boy athlete who got a full scholarship to college and now works in finance. Emma was daddy's little angel who got everything handed to her and never heard the word no. And me? Well, I was just Nicole, the one who worked 2 jobs through community college, paid her own way through everything, and somehow still managed to graduate with a degree in graphic design. Family dinners were like watching a Broadway show where everyone had a starring role except me. Jake just got another promotion, Mom would gush, practically glowing with pride. Emma's engagement photos turned out absolutely gorgeous. Dad would beam, showing pictures to anyone within a 10-foot radius. Meanwhile, I'd sit there eating my pot roast, occasionally getting asked to pass the salt. When I landed my first real job at a marketing agency, I excitedly called to share the news. "That's nice, dear," Mom said absently. "Did I tell you Jake bought a new BMW?" The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was like watching your parents divide a pizza where 2 people get half each and you get the crust. Christmas mornings were particularly brutal. Jake and Emma would unwrap elaborate gifts, expensive electronics, designer clothes, weekend getaways. I'd get practical items, socks, a coffee mug, maybe a gift card for $20 if they were feeling generous. "We know you appreciate useful things," Mom would say with a bright smile, as if getting a pack of underwear while your siblings got MacBooks was somehow a character-building exercise. But I adapted. I became self-sufficient by necessity, independent by survival. I learned to celebrate my own victories because no one else would. When I got my driver's license, I took myself out for ice cream. When I graduated college, I threw my own party with my roommates. When I got my first apartment, I bought myself flowers and champagne. It wasn't ideal, but it was mine, which is why Grandpa Henry's phone call hit me like a freight train. He'd always been different from my parents, warmer, more interested in who I actually was rather than who they thought I should be. He'd slip me $20 when I visited, ask about my work, remember details about my life that my own parents forgot 5 minutes after I told them. But buying me a house? That was so far beyond anything I'd ever expected from anyone in my family that I honestly thought he might be having some kind of senior moment. "Grandpa," I said carefully, Are you sure you have the right granddaughter? Maybe you meant Emma?" He chuckled, that familiar rumbling laugh I'd loved since childhood. "Nicole Ruth Morrison, born April 15th, 1996, majored in graphic design, works at Henderson Marketing, drives a blue Honda Civic that's older than some of your coworkers." Did I miss anything? My hands started shaking. "You really bought me a house?" "I really did, sweetheart. I've been planning this for months. Your name's already on the deed." That's when I realized my parents had some explaining to do. My parents' house looked exactly the same as it had my entire childhood. Perfectly manicured lawn, white picket fence, and not a single blade of grass out of place. Very much like their version of family dynamics, everything neat and tidy on the surface, dysfunction carefully hidden underneath. I pulled into the driveway Monday evening, still processing Grandpa Henry's revelation from the day before. The house deed was in my purse, along with photos he'd texted me of a gorgeous colonial with a wraparound porch and mature oak trees. My house, apparently. Mom opened the door before I could knock, which meant she'd been watching for me through the living room window. "Nicole, what a lovely surprise." Her smile was just a little too bright. Her voice pitched just a little too high. Classic Linda Morrison tells, something was definitely wrong. "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside. The living room was exactly as I remembered. Beige everything, family photos covering the mantel where Jake and Emma featured prominently, and I appeared occasionally in group shots, usually partially hidden behind someone else. Dad looked up from his newspaper, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "What brings you by on a Monday night?" "Grandpa Henry called me yesterday." I said, watching their faces carefully. Told me some interesting news about a house on Maple Street. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Mom's smile flickered like a dying light bulb. Dad folded his newspaper with deliberate precision, the kind of slow, careful movement people make when they're buying time to think. What exactly did your grandfather tell you? Mom asked, settling onto the sofa and patting the cushion beside her. I remained standing. Being taller gave me a psychological advantage I'd learned to use over the years. He told me he bought me a house, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, hardwood floors throughout. My name's on the deed. I pulled out the paperwork Grandpa Henry had overnighted to me. Funny thing is, this is the first I'm hearing about it. Dad cleared his throat. That particular sound he made when he was about to deliver bad news or dodge responsibility. Usually both. Your grandfather mentioned he was considering some real estate investments. We didn't realize he'd actually gone through with it. Real estate investments? I repeated. Dad, he specifically bought this house for me. My name is literally on the legal documents. You're telling me you knew nothing about this? The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out how to spin this situation. Finally, Mom spoke up. Well, you know how your grandfather gets ideas in his head. We thought it was just talk. Just talk, I repeated flatly. A $250,000 house is just talk? That number hit them like a physical blow. Mom's face went pale. Dad's newspaper crinkled as his grip tightened. He spent that much? Dad asked, his voice strained. Now we were getting somewhere. Did you think he was going to buy me a garden shed? I asked. And okay, maybe my tone had a little more bite than necessary. But honestly, the audacity of these people never ceased to amaze me. Nicole, Mom said carefully, you have to understand. Your grandfather isn't thinking clearly these days. He's getting older. He's lonely since your grandmother passed, and he's making impulsive decisions. A house is a huge responsibility. Maybe it would be better if what? I interrupted. If you took care of it for me, managed the property, maybe rented it out and kept the income. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know. Bingo. They'd been planning to somehow get control of the house all along. They just hadn't expected Grandpa Henry to put it directly in my name and actually tell me about it. That's not what we meant, Dad said quickly. We're just concerned about the financial burden. Property taxes, maintenance, insurance. It's a lot for someone your age. Someone my age, I repeated. You mean someone who's been financially independent since she was 18, while her siblings got their rent paid and cars handed to them? Mom flinched. Direct hits were always effective with her. We've always treated you children fairly, she protested. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos Grandpa Henry had sent. The house was absolutely beautiful. Everything I'd ever dreamed of but never thought I could afford on my own. Suddenly, their concern made perfect sense. This wasn't about protecting me from financial burden. This was about them realizing that Grandpa Henry had just made me financially equal to, or possibly even better off than, Jake and Emma. And they couldn't stand it. Tuesday morning, I called in sick to work, which I never do, and drove straight to 1247 Maple Street. The house was even more beautiful in person than in Grandpa Henry's photos. Victorian colonial style painted soft blue with white trim. A wraparound porch with hanging flower baskets that someone had been maintaining. The front yard was mature and landscaped, with huge oak trees that would provide amazing shade in summer and gorgeous colors in fall. It looked like something from a magazine, the kind of house I used to drive through nice neighborhoods and dream about owning someday. I sat in my car for 10 minutes just staring at it, trying to wrap my head around the reality that this was actually mine. The key was exactly where Grandpa Henry said it would be, under the third planter on the right side of the porch. My hands shook slightly as I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Hardwood floors gleamed in the morning sunlight streaming through large windows. The living room was spacious with a beautiful stone fireplace, built-in bookshelves, and crown molding that spoke of old-world craftsmanship. The kitchen was updated but maintained the home's character, with granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and a breakfast nook that overlooked the backyard. Upstairs, 4 bedrooms and 2 full bathrooms offered more space than I'd ever had in my entire life. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet bigger than my current studio apartment. I stood in what could be my bedroom, looking out at tree-lined streets where children rode bicycles and neighbors walked dogs, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom told me about Grandpa's house purchase. We should talk. I stared at the message, noting how she phrased it. Not your house, or the house Grandpa bought you. Just Grandpa's house purchase, like I was some kind of temporary caretaker rather than the actual owner. Classic Emma, making everything about her perspective. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked through every room again, taking pictures, making mental notes about furniture placement and decorating possibilities. In the basement, I found something that made my heart skip. A workshop area with good lighting and plenty of space. Perfect for freelance design projects or maybe even starting my own business someday. By noon, I'd spent 3 hours in the house and I was completely in love. This wasn't just a building. It was possibility, independence, and validation all wrapped up in mortgage papers and property deeds. It represented something I'd never had. A place that was entirely, unequivocally mine. No shared walls with roommates, no tiny kitchen barely big enough for one person, no bathroom down the hall. This was space to breathe, to grow, to become whoever I wanted to be. My phone rang as I was locking the front door. Jake's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Hey, Nicole." His voice was carefully casual, which immediately put me on high alert. Jake never called me unless he needed something. Mom mentioned Grandpa bought you some property. He bought me a house, Jake. A really beautiful house. Right, well, here's the thing. I've been thinking about it. And maybe I should take a look at the investment potential. You know, help you figure out if it's worth keeping or if you should sell and put the money into something more practical. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's audacity is so stunning that you actually feel dizzy? Drop a comment below about the most outrageous thing a family member has ever suggested to you. Investment potential. I repeated slowly. You want to evaluate whether I should keep the house my grandfather specifically bought for me. Well, yeah. I mean, real estate can be tricky. Market fluctuations, maintenance costs, property management. You don't really have experience with this kind of thing. The assumption that I was too inexperienced, too naive, too female to handle property ownership made my teeth clench. What exactly are you suggesting, Jake? Maybe I could help manage the property for you. Handle the business side of things. You could still live there, obviously, but I could deal with insurance, taxes, any rental opportunities. Take some of the burden off your shoulders. There it was, the family plan. They couldn't stop Grandpa Henry from giving me the house, but they could certainly try to control it. Jake would manage it, which meant he'd control the finances. Mom and Dad would provide guidance about major decisions. Emma would probably want to host family gatherings there because it was bigger than her apartment. I'd go from being grateful recipient to glorified caretaker of my own property. That's really thoughtful, I said sweetly, but I think I can handle it myself. Nicole, be realistic. Do you even know what property taxes are on a house like that? Do you have 6 months of mortgage payments saved in case you lose your job? Have you researched home insurance rates? His questions were designed to make me feel overwhelmed and unprepared. The old Nicole might have started doubting herself, wondering if maybe she was in over her head. But standing on the porch of my beautiful house, key in my hand, I felt something different. "Jake," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I appreciate your concern, but this is my house, my responsibility, and my decision. Look, I'm just trying to help. You don't have to get defensive. I'm not defensive. I'm decisive. There's a difference." I hung up and immediately called Grandpa Henry. It was time to understand exactly what he'd been thinking when he made this incredible gift possible. Grandpa Henry lived in a charming little bungalow about 20 minutes from my parents' house, surrounded by a garden that Grammy Rose had planted before she passed 5 years ago. He maintained it meticulously, and I suspected it was his way of keeping her memory alive. When I knocked on his door Wednesday afternoon, he opened it with the biggest smile I'd seen from anyone in my family in years. "There's my granddaughter. Come in, come in. I just made coffee." His living room was cozy and lived in, filled with family photos spanning decades. Unlike my parents' carefully curated display, Grandpa Henry's photos told real stories. Him and Grammy Rose at their wedding, family vacations where everyone actually looked happy, random moments of genuine joy captured over the years. I noticed something that made my throat tighten. Several recent photos of just me and him, pictures I didn't even remember being taken. "Grandpa," I said, settling into his comfortable armchair, "I need to understand what's happening with this house. My family is acting like I've inherited the crown jewels, and I'm getting pressure from all directions about what I should do with it." He poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, the kind that accumulated in kitchens over decades of living. "Tell me exactly what they're saying," he said, his eyes sharp and focused despite his 82 years. I walked him through the conversations with my parents, Jake's offer to manage the property, Emma's text about needing to talk. With each detail, his expression grew more serious. "I see," he said finally. "They're trying to control what they couldn't prevent." "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his recliner, the leather creased from years of use. "Nicole, I've been watching this family treat you like a second-class citizen for your entire life. I've bitten my tongue, kept my opinions to myself because your parents are my son and daughter-in-law, and I tried to respect their parenting choices. But you're 28 years old now, and I'm 82, and I'm done watching you get pushed aside." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. "Grandpa, let me finish," he said gently. "When your grandmother was dying, she made me promise something. She said, 'Henry, that girl is going to need someone in her corner someday. She's got steel in her spine, but this family is going to try to break her spirit. Don't let them.' I've been thinking about how to honor that promise for 5 years. My eyes filled with tears I hadn't expected. Grammy Rose had seen something in me that even I hadn't recognized. She said I had steel in my spine. She said you were the only one of her grandchildren who'd inherited her backbone. Jake's got your father's need for approval. Emma's got your mother's entitlement. But you got Ruth Morrison's stubborn determination to make your own way in the world." He reached across and patted my hand. She was right. "But why a house? Why such an enormous gift?" Grandpa Henry stood and walked to a drawer in his desk, pulling out a thick folder. "Because I've been supplementing your parents' income for years," he said matter-of-factly. "Monthly checks, emergency funds, help with Jake's college loans, Emma's wedding expenses, your father's business investments that never quite pan out. I've been subsidizing their lifestyle while watching them treat you like you don't matter." The folder contained bank statements, canceled checks, receipts spanning decades. The numbers were staggering. "Grandpa, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars. $437,000 over the past 15 years to be exact. Plus the house I helped them buy, the cars I co-signed for, the credit card debts I've quietly paid off. Your parents have been living well above their means with my help, and they've never shared a penny of that assistance with you." I stared at the paperwork, my worldview shifting like puzzle pieces, rearranging themselves into a completely different picture. "They never told me you were helping them financially." Of course they didn't. Because then they'd have to explain why none of that help ever trickled down to the daughter who actually needed it. While you were working 2 jobs to pay for community college, they were using my money for family vacations you weren't invited on. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just that they'd excluded me from family assistance, but that they'd actively hidden it while watching me struggle. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm changing how I do things," he said firmly. "Starting now, my financial help goes where it's actually appreciated and needed. I bought you that house because you deserve a foundation to build your life on. Your parents never gave you that foundation, but I can." I thought about Jake's offer to manage my property, Mom's concerns about the financial burden, Dad's surprise at the purchase price. They weren't worried about my ability to handle home ownership. They were worried about what Grandpa Henry's direct support of me might mean for their own financial security. "Do they know you're telling me about the money?" He smiled, and for the first time, I saw a hint of mischief in his expression that reminded me exactly where I'd inherited my own rebellious streak. "They're about to find out." Thursday evening, Grandpa Henry requested a family dinner at my parents' house. "All 4 generations," he'd said when he called Mom. "There are some financial matters we need to discuss." I arrived 15 minutes early, partly because I wanted to observe my parents' preparation anxiety, and partly because I genuinely enjoyed watching people squirm when they'd been caught in decades of lies. Call it petty, but after 28 years of being treated like the family's consolation prize, I'd earned a little schadenfreude. Mom had pulled out her good china, the set she usually reserved for Easter and Christmas. Dad was wearing his business casual slacks instead of his usual weekday sweatpants. Jake arrived precisely on time with a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And Emma showed up fashionably late, in a dress that definitely came from somewhere with a personal shopper. The whole scene felt like a performance where everyone knew their lines except me. Grandpa Henry arrived last, carrying a worn leather briefcase that looked older than I was. He accepted Mom's offer of coffee and complimented her pot roast with the same polite warmth he'd shown for as long as I could remember. Small talk flowed easily, Jake discussing his latest promotion, Emma sharing updates about her wedding planning, Mom and Dad playing their roles as proud parents perfectly. I sat quietly, watching the dynamic I'd observed my entire life, everyone performing their assigned roles in the Morrison family drama. "Well," Grandpa Henry said finally, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate precision, "I suppose we should discuss why I asked you all here." The temperature in the room shifted noticeably. Jake straightened in his chair. Emma's smile became more fixed. Mom and Dad exchanged the kind of quick glance that spoke of private conversations and shared concerns. I've made some changes to my financial arrangements, Grandpa Henry continued, opening his briefcase and removing several manila folders. Changes that affect this family significantly. He placed the folders on the dining table with the careful precision of someone who'd planned this moment extensively. As you know, I've been providing financial support to various family members for many years. Robert, Linda, I've helped with your mortgage, car payments, emergency expenses, and various investments. Jake, I covered most of your student loans and helped with your condo down payment. Emma, your wedding expenses and that European honeymoon trip are covered. I watched my family's faces as he laid out what I'd learned the day before. The discomfort was palpable, like watching people realize their secrets had become public knowledge. Dad, my father started, but Grandpa Henry held up his hand. I'm not finished, he said calmly. Over the past 15 years, I've provided approximately $440,000 in direct financial support to this family, none of which has ever been shared with or extended to Nicole. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock in the living room ticking, the sound of Emma's wedding ring clicking against her water glass as her hands shook slightly. Nicole has worked full-time since she was 16, Grandpa Henry continued. She paid her own way through college, bought her own car, rented her own apartments, and built her own career without a single dollar of family assistance. Meanwhile, the rest of you have been living comfortable lives subsidized by my support. Jake cleared his throat. Grandpa, we never asked you to compare what you gave different family members. You're right, Grandpa Henry said. You never asked me to compare. You just assumed I'd never tell Nicole how much I'd been helping everyone else while she struggled alone. Emma finally found her voice. This feels like you're trying to create division in our family. I almost laughed. Create division? The division had been there my entire life. He was just forcing everyone to acknowledge it. No, Emma, I said, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down. Division already existed. Grandpa's just pointing out that it wasn't accidental. Mom's hands fluttered nervously with her napkin. Nicole, we've always treated you fairly. We've never shown favoritism. Mom, I said gently, Jake's student loans were paid off by Grandpa Henry. Emma's wedding is being funded by Grandpa Henry. You've been receiving monthly financial support from Grandpa Henry for 15 years. I've received exactly $0 in family financial assistance my entire adult life. In what universe is that fair treatment? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been burning unnoticed for years. Finally, Dad spoke up. Your grandfather's support was meant to help the family as a whole. We used it for things that benefited everyone. Like what? I asked. The family vacation to Hawaii that I wasn't invited to? The new SUV that seats exactly 5 people, not 6? The home renovations that happened while I was working double shifts to afford my studio apartment? Grandpa Henry smiled slightly, the expression of someone watching a long overdue reckoning unfold exactly as planned. Which brings us to the changes I'm implementing, he said, pulling out a formal letter from one of his folders. Effective immediately, all regular financial support to Robert and Linda Morrison will cease. All future college funds, wedding contributions, and emergency assistance will be redirected to Nicole Morrison to be used at her discretion for her education, housing, business ventures, or future family planning. The explosion that followed was everything I could have hoped for and more. The aftermath of Grandpa Henry's announcement was like watching a carefully constructed house of cards collapse in slow motion. Mom's face went through approximately 17 different shades of pale before settling on a gray that matched her good china. Dad's jaw worked silently, opening and closing like a fish out of water. Jake and Emma looked like they'd been slapped with a frozen mackerel, which honestly was one of the more satisfying sights I'd witnessed in my 28 years. Dad, you can't be serious, my father finally managed. We have obligations, commitments. The mortgage refinancing is based on your ongoing support. Then perhaps you should have considered the sustainability of living beyond your actual means, Grandpa Henry replied calmly. Particularly while your own daughter was eating ramen noodles for dinner because she couldn't afford anything else. Emma recovered first, which didn't surprise me. She'd always been quick to reframe situations to her advantage. Grandpa, this seems like a knee-jerk reaction to some kind of misunderstanding. Nicole's never expressed feeling left out of family financial decisions. I stared at her, marveling at the audacity. Emma, I wasn't included in family financial decisions. How could I express feeling left out of something I didn't know existed? You could have asked, Jake chimed in, and I actually laughed out loud at that one. Asked what, Jake? Hey, Mom and Dad, are you secretly receiving thousands of dollars from Grandpa that you're not sharing with me? How would I even think to ask that question? We kept financial matters private to avoid creating jealousy or competition between siblings, Mom said, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver a lecture about gratitude and appropriate behavior. Grandpa Henry leaned back in his chair, watching the family dynamics unfold with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a particularly dysfunctional tribe. "Linda," he said quietly, "Nicole has been financially independent since she was 18. Jake is 30 and Emma is 26, and both still rely on family money for basic expenses. If anyone should be concerned about jealousy and competition, it might be them." The truth of that statement hit the room like a physical force. My siblings, who'd always positioned themselves as the successful ones, the responsible ones, the ones who'd made good choices, were actually the ones who couldn't maintain their lifestyles without subsidies. I was the only one who'd built something sustainable on my own. "This is all very philosophical," Dad said, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. But the practical reality is that sudden changes in financial arrangements affect everyone. "Nicole, surely you can see that disrupting the entire family's financial stability isn't the answer here." And there it was, the pivot I'd been waiting for. They were going to try to make this my fault, my choice, my responsibility to fix. "Dad," I said, standing up from the table, "I'm not disrupting anyone's financial stability. You built your financial plans around money that was never guaranteed to continue forever. That was your choice, not mine." "But family should stick together," Emma protested. "We should find a solution that works for everyone." "I agree," I said. "Family should stick together. But for 28 years, I've been the only one expected to sacrifice for the good of the family. When I couldn't afford college, nobody suggested sharing the family resources. When I was working 2 jobs while you were all living comfortably, nobody thought about evening the scales. When I graduated with honors and got my first real job, the family celebration lasted about 15 seconds before we moved on to talking about Jake's promotion. I walked to the window and looked out at the perfectly manicured yard that Grandpa Henry's money had helped maintain. Now, suddenly, when the financial support starts flowing in my direction, family solidarity becomes important. Funny how that works. "Nicole's right," Grandpa Henry said firmly. "For 30 years, I watched this family operate on double standards. Support for some, independence for others. Pride in some achievements, indifference toward others. I'm too old to keep pretending that's normal or acceptable." He stood up, gathering his folders. "My decision is final. Nicole will receive the same level of support I've been providing to everyone else. If the rest of you want to continue receiving assistance, you can earn it the same way she has, through responsible financial behavior and genuine respect for family members." Mom's voice cracked slightly as she spoke. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Grandpa Henry said, putting on his jacket, "that Nicole will decide who deserves help and who doesn't. My checkbook now follows her recommendations." As the implications of that statement sank in, I realized my grandfather hadn't just given me a house. He'd handed me the power to completely rewrite the family dynamic. And judging by the looks on everyone's faces, they were beginning to understand that too. The real question was, what was I going to do with that power? Friday morning, I woke up in my studio apartment for what I hoped would be one of the last times. The lease was month to month, which meant I could be in my actual house within 30 days. My actual house. Even thinking the words gave me a little thrill that probably wasn't entirely mature, but I'd earned the right to be immature about home ownership after years of watching my siblings get everything handed to them. My phone had been buzzing since dawn with texts from various family members, each taking a different approach to the new reality. Jake went with logic and guilt. "We should sit down and discuss how to make this transition work for everyone. Family is more important than money." Emma opted for emotional manipulation. "I'm so hurt that you're letting Grandpa turn us against each other. This isn't like you." And Mom chose the classic passive-aggressive approach. "I hope you're happy with how things turned out. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned." I deleted all of them without responding. The time for family negotiations was over. I'd spent my entire life being the one expected to compromise, accommodate, and make things work for everyone else. Not anymore. At work, I submitted my request for a week of vacation time. "Big plans?" my boss Maria asked, and I couldn't help smiling. "I'm moving into my new house." "You bought a house?" "Nicole, that's amazing. When did this happen?" I explained about Grandpa Henry's surprise gift, watching Maria's expression shift from confusion to amazement to something that looked like envy. "Your grandfather just bought you a house? Like, outright bought you a house? 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, hardwood floors, wraparound porch?" I'm still pinching myself. "And your family's reaction?" she asked. and I could tell from her tone that she'd picked up on the complexity of the situation. Mixed, I said diplomatically. Change is hard for everyone. But the truth was more complicated than that. My family wasn't struggling with change. They were struggling with losing control. For the first time in my life, I had something they wanted, something they couldn't diminish or dismiss or claim credit for. That afternoon, I drove to the house again, parking in what was technically my driveway and walking through what was legally my property. The reality of it was starting to sink in, replacing the surreal feeling with something more solid and permanent. I had a home. Not an apartment, not a rental, not someone else's space that I borrowed in exchange for monthly payments. A home. I was measuring windows for curtains when a car pulled up outside. Through the front window, I watched Emma get out of her silver Audi, the one that Grandpa Henry had helped her finance according to yesterday's revelations. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. Resignation, envy, calculation. With Emma, it was always hard to tell. I opened the front door before she could knock. Emma, Nicole, can we talk? She was wearing her serious conversation outfit. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater, minimal makeup that probably took 45 minutes to achieve the natural look. Everything about her appearance was calculated to remind me that she was the put-together sister, the one who'd made good choices and deserved good things. Of course, I said, stepping back to let her inside. Welcome to my home. She winced slightly at the emphasis on my, which told me she'd gotten the message. Good. We walked into the living room, where late afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, highlighting the crown molding and built-in bookshelves. It really is beautiful, Emma said, and I heard genuine appreciation in her voice. Grandpa has good taste in real estate. He does, I agreed. He also has good judgment about people. Emma settled onto the window seat, looking around the room with the appraising gaze she'd inherited from our mother. Nicole, I came here to apologize. That was not what I'd expected. Oh? I've been thinking about everything Grandpa said yesterday, and I realized something. I never actually thought about things from your perspective. I just accepted that our family worked a certain way, and I never questioned whether that way was fair to everyone. It was a good apology, as far as family apologies went. Specific enough to sound genuine, general enough to avoid admitting to any particular wrongdoing. And what conclusion did you reach? I asked. That maybe we did treat you differently. Not intentionally, but thoughtlessly. And that's not okay. She twisted her engagement ring, a nervous habit from childhood. The thing is, I don't think any of us realized how much we relied on Grandpa's help until yesterday. When he laid it all out like that, I felt embarrassed. Like maybe we'd been living above our means without acknowledging it. What do you think will happen next? Drop your prediction in the comments below. Maybe, I said, and Emma had the grace to look uncomfortable. Okay, we definitely were. And seeing you sitting there, knowing you'd been supporting yourself completely while we were all getting help we never told you about, it made me feel like a fraud. Because you were being fraudulent, I said matter-of-factly. You were all presenting yourselves as successful and independent while secretly receiving financial support that was hidden from the one family member who actually was successful and independent. Emma nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. I appreciate the apology, I said. But apologies don't change anything unless they're followed by changed behavior. What would that look like? She asked. What would I need to do differently? It was a fair question, and one I hadn't fully thought through yet. What did I want from my family moving forward? What would constitute genuine change versus just better public relations? Honesty, I said finally. No more secret financial arrangements. No more family decisions that affect me made without including me. No more treating my successes as less important than yours. And no more expecting me to be the one who compromises for the sake of family peace. Emma was quiet for a long moment, looking around my beautiful living room. Those are reasonable requests, she said finally. But I think Jake and our parents are going to have a harder time with them than I am. That's not my problem, I replied. Their comfort level with treating me fairly isn't my responsibility to manage anymore. As Emma left, I realized something important. The balance of power in my family had shifted permanently. The question wasn't whether they would accept the new dynamic. The question was whether I would let them earn their way back into my life on terms that actually worked for me. Sunday morning, I was painting the guest bedroom in my new house when my phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen, and I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail before deciding I might as well get this conversation over with. Hi, Mom. Nicole, we need to talk. Can you come over today? Her tone was crisp and businesslike, which meant she'd spent the weekend strategizing with Dad about how to handle the new family financial reality. "Actually, I'm pretty busy today," I said, dipping my brush back into the pale green paint I'd chosen. "I'm painting my bedroom." The emphasis on my bedroom was probably petty, but I'd earned the right to be a little petty. "This can't wait. It's about your grandfather's decision. There are things you need to understand before you make any hasty choices." "What kind of hasty choices?" I asked, though I already suspected where this conversation was heading. "Nicole, your grandfather is 82 years old. When people get to his age, they sometimes make emotional decisions that aren't practical long-term. This house, the financial arrangements, cutting off support to your father and me, it's all very dramatic, but it's not sustainable." And there it was. They were going to try to convince me that Grandpa Henry wasn't mentally competent to make his own financial decisions. "Mom, Grandpa Henry is one of the sharpest people I know. His mind is completely clear, and his decisions are based on 30 years of observing how this family treats me versus how it treats Jake and Emma." "That's not true," she said quickly. "We've always treated you fairly." "Mom, yesterday Emma apologized for exactly the behavior you just claimed never happened. Which one of you should I believe?" Silence. Then, "Emma was just feeling emotional. She didn't mean to imply that we'd actually been unfair to you." I set down my paintbrush and walked to the window overlooking my backyard. My backyard, with mature trees and a garden space where I could plant whatever I wanted. "Mom, let me ask you something directly. When Jake graduated college, how much money did Grandpa Henry give him toward his student loans?" "I don't see how that's relevant." "When Emma got engaged, how much did Grandpa Henry contribute to the wedding expenses?" "Nicole, these are private family financial matters. How much monthly support have you and Dad been receiving from Grandpa Henry for the past 15 years? Each question met with deflection, which was an answer in itself. "The amounts don't matter," Mom said finally. "What matters is that your grandfather is making decisions that will hurt the whole family." "No, Mom. Grandpa Henry is making decisions that will hurt you and Dad specifically. Jake and Emma are adults who can support themselves if they have to. The only people who genuinely can't maintain their current lifestyle without his subsidies are you and Dad." That hit home. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "We're your parents, Nicole. We raised you, sacrificed for you, gave you everything you needed to become the person you are today. You gave me the absolute minimum required by law," I corrected. "Food, shelter, clothing, education through high school. The same things you gave Jake and Emma, except they also got financial help through college, career support, family connections, emotional investment in their successes, and ongoing financial assistance as adults. I got independence training." "We taught you to be self-sufficient," she protested. "We're proud of how capable you've become." "You taught me to be self-sufficient because it was easier than treating me like an equal family member. And now that my self-sufficiency has been rewarded with Grandpa Henry's support, you want to undermine it because it threatens your financial security." The truth hung between us like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. Finally, Mom spoke again, her voice smaller than before. "What do you want from us? Nicole, what would it take for things to go back to normal?" "Normal was never working for me," I said gently. "Normal was me accepting less so everyone else could have more. I'm not interested in going back to that." "Then what? You're going to let your grandfather destroy this family over money?" "Mom, I'm not letting Grandpa Henry do anything. He made his own decision based on his own observations. If you want to rebuild relationships, it needs to be because you actually value having me in your life, not because you need my influence with his checkbook." When she hung up without saying goodbye, I realized we'd just had the most honest conversation we'd had in years. It wasn't comfortable, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I hadn't been the one expected to make the conversation comfortable for her. That afternoon, I picked out curtains for my living room and ordered a dining table that would seat 8 people. Not because I had 7 people to invite for dinner, but because I could. Because this was my house, my choice, my life to build exactly the way I wanted it. And if my family wanted to be part of that life, they were going to have to earn their way in like everyone else. Tuesday evening, Jake showed up at my house uninvited, which was exactly the kind of boundary-crossing behavior I'd expected from him. I opened the door to find him standing on my porch wearing his most serious business expression, the one he used during important meetings when he wanted people to know he meant business. "We need to have a conversation," he announced, stepping inside before I'd actually invited him in. Bold move, considering the conversation we'd had the week before about me being capable of managing my own property. "Hello, Jake," Please come in, I said sarcastically, closing the door behind him. What brings you to my home uninvited on a Tuesday night? He looked around the living room, taking in the fresh paint, the new furniture I'd been slowly acquiring, the general air of someone making themselves comfortable in their own space. Nice place, he said, though his tone suggested he found my home ownership more irritating than impressive. Thank you. Grandpa Henry has excellent taste. About that, Jake said, settling onto my new sofa without being invited to sit. I've been thinking about this whole situation, and I have some concerns. What kind of concerns? I asked, remaining standing. Being physically higher than him felt important for some reason. Maybe because I'd spent so many years feeling small in family conversations. I'm worried that you're being manipulated, he said seriously. Grandpa Henry is using you to get back at Mom and Dad for something, and you're getting caught in the middle of family drama that has nothing to do with you. I stared at him, marveling at his ability to reframe reality to suit his needs. Jake, this has everything to do with me. I'm the one who's been excluded from family financial support for my entire adult life. But that's not personal, he said quickly. That's just how families work. Parents help kids when they need it most. You've always been more independent, so you needed less help. I've been more independent because I had to be, I said. Because the alternative was financial instability. I didn't choose independence over family support. I was given independence instead of family support. Jake shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing his argument wasn't landing the way he'd planned. Okay, but cutting off Mom and Dad completely seems extreme. They're going to lose their house, Nicole. Is that really what you want? They're not going to lose their house, I replied. They're going to have to pay their own mortgage like adults. There's a difference. With what money? Dad's business hasn't been profitable in years. Mom works part-time at the boutique. Without Grandpa's help, they can't maintain their current lifestyle. Then they'll have to change their lifestyle, I said matter-of-factly. Sell the big house, buy something smaller, stop financing cars they can't afford, live within their actual means like the rest of us do. Listen to yourself, Jake said, his voice rising slightly. You're talking about our parents like they're strangers? These are the people who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who gave you everything you needed to succeed. They gave me the bare minimum, I corrected, and they gave you and Emma everything extra. There's a difference. And pretending there isn't doesn't make it less true. Jake stood up, pacing to the window like he was building up to his closing argument. You know what I think is really happening here? I think you're angry about feeling left out, and now you have power, and you're using it to punish everyone who you think wronged you. And what if I am? I asked, which clearly wasn't the response he'd expected. What if I am angry about 28 years of being treated like a second-class family member? What if I am tired of being expected to be grateful for less than everyone else gets? What if I do think some consequences are overdue? That's not who you are. Nicole, you're not vindictive or petty. You're the reasonable one, the one who keeps the peace and makes things work for everyone. And there it was, the real problem. Jake couldn't handle the fact that I'd stopped being the family's designated peacekeeper. He needed me to stay in my assigned role, the responsible one who sacrificed her own needs for family harmony. Maybe I was never actually reasonable, I said. Maybe I was just trained to accept unreasonable treatment as normal. So what's your plan here? Cut everyone off? Decide you don't have a family anymore? My plan, I said, walking to the front door and opening it, is to build relationships with people who actually value having me in their lives. If that includes family members, great. If it doesn't, that's their choice. Jake stood in my doorway for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something else. Finally, Grandpa Henry won't live forever, you know. When he's gone, all you'll have left is family. Don't burn bridges you might need someday. Jake, I said gently, those bridges were never actually built in the first place. I can't burn something that was never there. After he left, I sat in my beautiful living room and realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely at peace with my family situation. Not because it was fixed, but because it was honest. No more pretending that dysfunction was normal. No more accepting less than I deserved. No more being responsible for other people's comfort with unfairness. Tomorrow, I was going to start looking into what it would take to turn my basement workshop into a proper freelance studio. Maybe it was time to build something entirely my own. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Dad, standing on my porch at 7 a.m. holding 2 coffee cups from the diner down the street. He looked tired, older somehow, like he'd spent the night wrestling with problems that didn't have easy solutions. I brought coffee, he said when I opened the door. Thought maybe we could talk before you go to work. I accepted the coffee and motioned him inside, curious about this new approach. Dad had never been one for heartfelt conversations or emotional revelations. He was more the strong, silent type who expressed love through practical actions and expected everyone to understand his feelings without him having to verbalize them. "Nice place," he said, looking around with what seemed like genuine appreciation rather than Jake's calculating assessment or Emma's nervous envy. "Your grandfather chose well." "He did," I agreed, settling into my favorite chair. "What did you want to talk about, Dad?" He sat on the edge of the sofa, holding his coffee cup with both hands like he needed something to anchor himself. "I owe you an apology, Nicole. A real one. Not the kind your mother specializes in where she apologizes for how you feel instead of what we did. That was unexpected, and more self-aware than I'd given him credit for. I'm listening. I've been thinking about everything your grandfather said on Thursday, and the more I think about it, the more I realize he's right. We did treat you differently. Not because we loved you less, but because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because you were easier. You didn't demand attention or create drama or need constant reassurance. You just quietly handled whatever life threw at you. So you took advantage of that," I said, not unkindly. "We did," he admitted. "We told ourselves we were teaching you independence and self-reliance. But really we were just taking the path of least resistance. It was easier to help Jake and Emma with their problems than to notice that you might have problems too." I sipped my coffee, studying this man who'd been my father for 28 years, but had never been entirely comfortable with emotional conversations. This level of honesty was new territory for both of us. "What changed your mind?" I asked. "Your mother," he said with a rueful smile. "She spent yesterday calling everyone in the family, trying to build support for having your grandfather's mental competency evaluated. By the time she finished, half our relatives were asking questions about why we'd never mentioned our financial arrangement with him and why you'd been excluded from family support." "Ah," I said. "The court of public opinion didn't go the way she expected." "Your Aunt Margaret was particularly blunt. Asked why we'd let you struggle through college while accepting help for Jake's loans. Asked why Emma's wedding was being subsidized while you weren't even included in family financial planning. Asked how we could justify hiding Grandpa's assistance from the one grandchild who actually needed it most." I could picture that conversation. Aunt Margaret had always been the family truth teller, the one who said what everyone else was thinking but was too polite to verbalize. What did Mom tell her? That it was complicated family business that outsiders wouldn't understand. Margaret told her it sounded like favoritism disguised as financial planning, and that she'd be ashamed to face Ruth Morrison in heaven after treating her granddaughter so poorly. The mention of Grammy Rose hit me unexpectedly hard. She'd been gone 5 years, but I still missed her fierce love and absolute loyalty to the people she cared about. Grammy Rose would have been furious about the financial arrangements, wouldn't she? "Livid," Dad agreed. "She always said you reminded her of herself at that age, determined to make your own way, too proud to ask for help, too loyal to complain about unfairness. She would have torn strips off all of us for letting this go on so long." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both thinking about the woman who'd been the emotional center of our family until cancer took her. "Dad," I said finally, "what exactly are you apologizing for?" "For failing you as a parent," he said simply. "For prioritizing other people's needs over yours consistently for decades. For teaching you that love comes with conditions and that you had to earn treatment that should have been automatic. For letting my own discomfort with conflict result in a family dynamic where the person causing the least trouble got the least attention." It was a good apology. Specific, honest, taking responsibility without making excuses. "I accept your apology," I said. "Thank you for making it. What I want to know," he continued, "is whether there's any way to rebuild what we should have built years ago. I don't mean the financial stuff. I mean the relationship. Father and daughter, real relationship, not just holiday calls and birthday cards." I looked around my living room, thinking about the question, did I want a relationship with my father? And if so, what would that look like? "I think that depends," I said slowly, "on whether you're willing to do the work to build something new rather than trying to fix something that was never working properly in the first place." "What would that work look like?" "Honesty," I said. "No more family secrets. No more financial arrangements that exclude me. No more expecting me to be the one who compromises for family harmony. And genuine interest in my life, not just polite inquiries when you need something from me." Dad nodded thoughtfully. "Those seem like reasonable terms for a fresh start." "Good," I said, because Grandpa Henry was right about something else. I did inherit Grammy Rose's backbone, and I'm done accepting less than I deserve from anyone. As Dad left, he turned back at the door. "Your mother's going to have a harder time with this new dynamic than I will." I know, I said. That's between her and me to figure out. But as I watched him walk to his car, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in my life, I'd had a conversation with my father where I felt like an equal participant rather than a problem to be managed. Maybe there was something here worth building after all. Friday afternoon, I was hanging pictures in my dining room when Grandpa Henry called with news that changed everything. Nicole, I need you to come over this weekend. There are some legal papers we need to go over, and some decisions I need to make about my estate planning. His voice sounded more serious than usual, and something in his tone made my stomach clench with worry. Grandpa, are you feeling okay? Is everything all right? I'm fine. Sweetheart. But I'm 82 years old, and recent events have reminded me that I need to get my affairs in order properly. Can you come by Sunday afternoon? I agreed immediately, though I spent the rest of Friday and all of Saturday wondering what kind of legal papers he needed to discuss. Sunday, I arrived at his house to find him sitting at his kitchen table with a woman I didn't recognize, surrounded by manila folders and official-looking documents. Nicole, this is Patricia Walsh, my attorney, Grandpa Henry said, standing to hug me. Patricia, this is my granddaughter Nicole, the one I told you about. Patricia was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of professional competence that immediately made me feel comfortable. It's nice to meet you, Nicole. Your grandfather speaks about you constantly. What's this about, Grandpa? I asked, settling into the chair across from them. I'm updating my will and estate planning, he said matter-of-factly. Recent family events have clarified some things for me about how I want my assets distributed after I'm gone. My chest tightened. I didn't want to think about Grandpa Henry not being here. Didn't want to consider a world without his steady presence and unconditional support. Patricia has been helping me restructure everything to reflect my current priorities and values, he continued. I wanted you here because some of these changes directly affect you. And I believe in transparency when it comes to family financial matters. He slid a folder across the table to me. This is a summary of my current assets and the proposed distribution. I opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning pages of legal language and financial figures that made my head spin. The bottom line was staggering. Grandpa Henry wasn't just comfortable, he was wealthy. The house he'd bought me represented less than 10% of his total assets. Grandpa, I had no idea you had this much money. Your grandmother and I lived modestly and invested carefully for 47 years, he said simply. We always planned to leave our family well provided for. Patricia leaned forward. Under your grandfather's revised will, the bulk of his estate will be held in trust for you, with provisions for your future education, business ventures, home purchases, and family planning. Your parents, brother, and sister will receive smaller amounts sufficient to pay off current debts but not enough to maintain their existing lifestyle without personal income. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Grandpa, this is life-changing money. It's security, he corrected. It's the foundation I should have built for you years ago instead of watching your parents take my assistance for granted while you struggled alone. I stared at the numbers, trying to process what this meant. Not just financial security, but genuine independence. The ability to start my own business, travel, maybe go back to school for my master's degree. All the possibilities I'd never dared to dream about because survival had always taken precedence. There's one more thing, Patricia said, pulling out another document. Your grandfather is also transferring the responsibility for family financial assistance to you, effective immediately. He's setting up a family fund that you'll control to be used at your discretion for legitimate family needs. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means, Grandpa Henry said with a slight smile, that if your parents want help with their mortgage, they'll need to ask you for it. If Jake needs assistance with his car payment, he'll need to explain to you why he deserves it. If Emma wants wedding money, she'll need to request it from you. The power dynamic would be completely reversed. They would all be dependent on my goodwill and judgment for the financial support they'd been taking for granted. Grandpa, that's a lot of responsibility. It is, he agreed. But you're the only one in this family who's demonstrated genuine financial responsibility and fair judgment. I trust you to make decisions based on actual need rather than favoritism or emotional manipulation. As I drove home that evening, my head was spinning with the magnitude of what had just happened. I wasn't just the recipient of an unexpected inheritance. I was now the gatekeeper for all family financial assistance. My parents, who'd spent decades treating me like a second-class family member, would now need to come to me if they wanted help with their bills. Jake and Emma, who'd never questioned their privileged position in the family hierarchy, would need to justify their request to the sister they'd always seen as less successful. But the most startling realization was this. For the first time in my life, I had real power in my family. Not the power to be petty or vindictive, but the power to demand fairness, honesty, and genuine respect. The power to ensure that any future family assistance would be distributed based on actual need rather than favoritism. The question now was, what kind of person would I choose to be with that power? Monday morning brought the phone call I'd been expecting since my meeting with Grandpa Henry and Patricia. Mom's number flashed on my screen at exactly 8 a.m., probably time to catch me before work when she assumed I'd be more amenable to family pressure. I let it ring twice before answering, no longer feeling the old anxiety about disappointing her. Hi, Mom. Nicole, we need to talk. Today, this afternoon. Your father and I would like you to come over after work. Her voice had that tight, controlled quality she used when she was barely containing panic. News of the will changes had obviously reached them, probably through Patricia's office notifying them about the reduced inheritance amounts. Actually, I have plans after work, I said, which was true. I was meeting with a contractor about converting my basement into a proper design studio. How about tomorrow evening? This can't wait until tomorrow. Nicole, do you understand what your grandfather has done? He's essentially disinherited his own son and grandchildren in favor of... She paused, clearly struggling with how to phrase it without saying something that revealed her true feelings. In favor of giving everything to you. Mom, he hasn't disinherited anyone. You're all still receiving inheritance money. It's just not enough to maintain a lifestyle you can't actually afford without subsidies. The silence that followed was thick with years of carefully avoided truths finally being spoken aloud. We raised you better than this, she said finally. We taught you about family loyalty and taking care of the people who love you. You taught me about family loyalty, I agreed. You just never demonstrated it toward me. Now, I'm demonstrating the same level of loyalty toward you that you showed me for 28 years. That's not fair. Nicole, we've always loved you. I know you love me, Mom. But love and fair treatment aren't the same thing, and I'm done pretending they are. Another silence. Then, what do you want from us? What will it take for you to share your grandfather's assistance the way a loving family member should? And there it was. Not an apology for decades of inequality, not recognition of unfair treatment, not a promise to do better, just a demand that I continue the family tradition of me making sacrifices so everyone else could be comfortable. Mom, I'm hanging up now. When you're ready to have a conversation about building an actual relationship rather than negotiating for financial support, let me know. I ended the call and immediately blocked her number for the day. I needed space to think without being bombarded by family pressure tactics. That afternoon, my contractor Miguel walked through the basement with me, pointing out electrical requirements and ventilation needs for a proper design studio. This is good space, he said, measuring windows for natural light. You could run a serious business from here. That's the plan, I said, envisioning drawing tables, computer stations, client meeting areas. I want to be completely independent. Smart woman, he said, making notes. Family business? Definitely not, I replied, and we both laughed. Wednesday evening brought an unexpected visitor. Emma, standing on my porch with a bottle of wine and an envelope. Can I come in? I have something to show you. She looked different somehow. Less polished, more real. Her hair was in a messy ponytail and she was wearing jeans and sneakers instead of her usual designer carefully curated look. What's in the envelope? I asked, letting her inside. Letters, she said, settling onto my sofa. Letters I never sent you over the years, apologies I wrote but never mailed. Thank you notes for things you did that I never acknowledged. Invitations to things I wanted to include you in but didn't because I was afraid Mom and Dad would disapprove. I opened the envelope, finding dozens of handwritten notes spanning years. Thank you for helping me with my resume when I was job hunting. I'm sorry Mom made that comment about your apartment being too small for Christmas dinner. I wanted to invite you to my engagement party, but Dad said it would be awkward with Kevin's family. Each note was a small acknowledgement of moments when she'd chosen family conformity over sibling loyalty. Why are you showing me these now? I asked. Because I realized something when I heard about Grandpa's will changes. I've spent my entire adult life being afraid of losing my position as the favorite daughter. I was so worried about maintaining my status that I never questioned whether that status was earned or fair. She pulled her knees up to her chest, looking younger than her 26 years. And I realized that having parents who love you conditionally isn't actually that great, because you're always afraid of losing their approval. What changed your mind? Watching how you handled everything this week. You didn't get vindictive or petty. You just stopped accepting less than you deserved. And I realized that's what I want to learn how to do too. She looked around my living room, taking in the space I'd created for myself. I want to earn my place in your life instead of expecting it because we share DNA. It was the most honest conversation Emma and I had ever had. What does that look like practically? I asked. I don't know yet, she admitted. Maybe starting by actually showing up for things that matter to you. Maybe defending you when family conversations turn into Nicole bashing sessions. Maybe treating you like someone I want to have a relationship with instead of someone I'm obligated to tolerate. Those would be good starts, I said. Emma, I don't want to cut anyone out of my life permanently, but I'm done being the family member who accepts less so everyone else can have more. If people want relationships with me, they need to be actual relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection. 6 months later, I was hosting Thanksgiving dinner in my beautiful dining room, using the table that seated 8 people. Dad was carving turkey, having spent the morning helping me prepare side dishes and actually seeming to enjoy the domestic collaboration. Emma was telling funny stories about her new job at a nonprofit, the position she'd taken after realizing she wanted to build something meaningful rather than just maintaining her lifestyle. Grandpa Henry was holding court from the head of the table, regaling us with stories from his and Grammy Rose's early marriage. Jake wasn't there. He'd made his choice when he refused to apologize for the financial management offer, instead doubling down on his belief that I was being manipulated by Grandpa Henry's senility. Mom wasn't there either. She'd spent 6 months trying to convince extended family members that I was selfishly hoarding money that should be shared equally, not realizing that her campaign only highlighted how long the inequality had existed without anyone noticing. It was a smaller Thanksgiving than traditional Morrison family gatherings, but it was also the first holiday where I felt genuinely wanted rather than obligated to attend. The first family meal where my presence was valued rather than just expected. The first celebration where I wasn't responsible for making everyone else comfortable. As I looked around the table at the faces of people who'd chosen to build real relationships with me rather than just demanding family loyalty, I realized Grandpa Henry had given me something more valuable than money or property. He'd given me permission to expect better, the financial independence to demand respect, and the security to walk away from relationships that diminished rather than enriched my life. And for the first time in my 28 years, I understood what it felt like to be genuinely grateful for my family. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life family drama and stories of people who refuse to accept less than they deserved. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what someone gives you, but what they teach you about your own worth.